A young man ended up in a prison full of highly dangerous criminals and stole a lighter from a local crime boss. Are you ready to find out what happened to him because of it? Then, let's begin. Eric Laff was only 19 years old, but he had already committed numerous crimes and spent a long time in juvenile detention centers. He broke the law once again, and this time, he ended up in an adult prison. He was searched and taken to solitary confinement as a highly dangerous criminal. His new cell was a small room with a bed, a table, and a toilet. Eric carefully packed his belongings and hid one or two sharp objects in a place where they wouldn't be easily found. Then, he examined his bruised fists. He knew he would be spending a long time in this place. To maintain his physical shape, he worked out in his cell every day. One day, he noticed that his lighter was broken. When prisoners were called for lunch, Eric asked his neighbor for a light, but the man refused. He took his meal and, in the process, managed to get into an argument with another inmate named Yagvoy. Then came the time for outdoor exercise. A middle-aged, bearded man approached Eric. It was his father, Neville, who was also serving time for his crimes. Neither of them seemed particularly happy to see each other. After the encounter, Neville returned to his cell and stared at an old childhood photo of his son with a heavy heart. After exercise time, the prisoners were allowed to walk around the prison grounds for a while. But Eric wasn't interested. Instead, he went to sleep. Later, his cell neighbor came in and handed him a lighter. But instead of thanking the man, Eric attacked him. Seeing that his victim was barely breathing, Eric fought off the guards and even took one hostage. He demanded a helicopter and more sweets. However, instead of a helicopter, he received a different kind of gift a month in the torture room. The guards dragged him to a new detention area. But Eric was getting used to it. All of this was being closely observed by the prison psychologist, Baumer. As fights continued to break out, Baumer noticed how other inmates were starting to gather around Eric, intrigued by his aggressive nature. However, they were soon chased away. Baumer requested that Eric be sent to him for a session. In return, he promised to protect the young man from the other prisoners. Unfortunately, the psychologist couldn't get Eric out of solitary confinement, but he could help him manage his aggression and anger. To do so, Eric had to attend therapy sessions led by Baumer. At first, the prisoners refused to participate because they were too violent and unpredictable. The psychologist's ability to help them seemed doubtful. The therapy sessions were brutal, chaotic, and aggressive. Despite this, the prison warden called Eric into his office and offered him a deal. He could attend therapy, but if he broke a single prison rule, he would be immediately removed from the program. Instead of answering, Eric tried to start another fight and was taken away. This prison had a strict hierarchy. All the inmates were divided into two groups, the strong and the weak. In Eric's block, the most powerful and influential prisoners were Neville and Davis. If you remember, Neville was Eric's father. The older man wanted to save his reckless son and hoped that Baumer's therapy would help him. One day, Neville visited Eric and urged him to follow prison rules. He explained that in order to survive, Eric needed to control himself and avoid conflicts with other inmates. But Eric didn't care about his father's advice. Taking advantage of an opportunity, he wandered through the prison and entered another inmate's cell. He searched through the man's belongings and stole 2 lighters. Then, he gave one of them to the inmate he had recently beaten up. It turned out that Eric had stolen from none other than the criminal kingpin and local dealer, Yagvoy. Furious, the man vowed to punish the thief. He began to suspect Eric and ordered other prisoners to take revenge on him. Meanwhile, Eric attended his first therapy session. The young man behaved extremely rudely and ignored all warnings. Frustrated, Eric stormed out of the room. A new fight was just about to break out. Baumer asked the other inmates to keep an eye on him. Later that day, Yagvoy's henchmen broke into Eric's cell and attacked him. They were about to force him to drink water from his own toilet. But another prisoner, Roan, who also attended Baumer's therapy session, saved Eric just in time. While showering, Eric thought about revenge. He couldn't understand why some inmates were helping him. When he asked, they simply said they were doing it for Baumer. Neville scolded his son again for his reckless behavior and constant fights. Together with his associates, he started observing Eric to determine who was against him and who supported him. Baumer later approached Eric and urged him to continue therapy. In response, Eric urinated on the floor, but surprisingly, he still agreed to attend another session. However, the new session brought little progress. Eric continued to be extremely aggressive and showed no signs of changing his behavior. The other prisoners were becoming increasingly irritated with him. They were ready to beat him up themselves, but Baumer didn't allow it. Meanwhile, Yagvoy made it clear to his clients that he would stop selling Parashok, contraband, until they dealt with Eric. Eric visited his father, but their conversation once again ended in conflict. However, he began attending therapy sessions more regularly and even showed small signs of improvement. At the very least, his conversations with other inmates were no longer ending in fights, which was already a big step forward. Eric started working out in the gym regularly. This helped him stay in shape and release some of his aggression. Neville was also training there. For the first time, he was pleased to see his son making an effort. After one of these workouts, Eric went to take a shower. Suddenly, one of Yagvoy's clients sneaked up on him and attacked. Eric was nearly strangled, but managed to fight back. The man admitted that Yagvoy had sent him. Immediately, Eric retrieved a couple of sharp objects from his secret stash and went after Yagvoy. After receiving a few blows, the frightened dealer tried to shift the blame onto someone else, Dennis. Without hesitation, Eric went straight for Denis, but his father stopped him just in time. The criminal authority Yagvoy was summoned. Eric explained that the dealers had lied. Dennis, fearing for his life, demanded an immediate transfer to another prison block. He warned Yagvoy that if he stayed, something very bad would happen to him. Yagvoy realized that Eric was only alive because of his powerful father's protection. If not for Neville, the young man would have been dead long ago. Neville later confronted Baumer. He was still dissatisfied with his son's behavior and blamed the psychologist for the lack of quick results. However, Neville was wrong. During the next therapy session, Eric successfully controlled his anger. Despite discussing unpleasant topics, he didn't lash out or start another fight. Baumer was thrilled. Even the prison authorities were surprised by Eric's progress. He was now interacting peacefully with other prisoners and even calmly drinking tea with them. But Neville was still unimpressed. He spoke with other therapy participants and concluded that the sessions were useless. To confirm his suspicions, he decided to attend a session himself. However, this only led to disaster. The criminal authority provoked a major conflict and then stormed out of the room in a fit of rage. The friendly atmosphere of the therapy sessions was gone. Everyone started shouting, cursing, and eventually fighting. The guards had to intervene. The prison warden blamed Eric for the chaos and banned him from attending therapy sessions. Eric was furious and blamed the guards for everything. Baumer, deeply frustrated, resigned from his job. Eric lost control of his temper. These therapy sessions were his only chance at improvement. Furious, he blamed his father, challenged him to a fight. Neville surrenders to his son and returns to his cell. However, Eric doesn't leave him alone and continues to insult him. Dennis steps in to defend his comrade and gets a taste of a few powerful punches himself. The guards break up the fight and prepare to send both father and son to solitary confinement. Eric accepts his punishment without resistance. However, Neville causes an uproar and fights back against the guards. To subdue him, they are forced to spray him with cold water from a hose. Even in solitary, Neville continues to shout at Eric from the opposite cell, trying to explain that he is only worried about his son's fate. But Eric doesn't believe him and refuses to listen. Desperate to escape solitary, Neville turns to his acquaintance, a guard named Selfie, for help. He lands a devastating punch on the officer, covers him with a blanket, and locks him in the cell. However, he lacks the courage to free his son. Upon returning to his cell, Neville discovers a horrifying truth: the prison administration has decided to classify everything as an accidental incident and intends to get rid of both him and Eric. The execution is to be carried out by Denise. At that very moment, Dennis attacks Neville but ends up being wounded by his own knife. Neville rushes to his son's solitary cell just in time. Eric is moments away from being killed. Neville overpowers the guards, grabs his son, and helps him regain consciousness. Overwhelmed by fear and panic, Eric starts crying. Now, Eric lives in the prison infirmary. One day, his therapy group mates come to visit him. They make sure he is doing well. Eventually, Eric is allowed to go outside for a walk. On the street, he spots his father being escorted away by guards. This is the last time Eric will ever see him. They can't even embrace, both of their hands are cuffed. They exchange a long, sorrowful farewell look. If you enjoyed the story, like and share it with your friends.